Hello, I'm going to be talking to you about New World First Bus Services Limited, which is a major bus operator in Hong Kong. It has a licensed fleet of over 700 vehicles, making it the third largest franchise holder after Kowloon Motor Bus and City Bus. New World First Bus is a relative newcomer to Hong Kong. It didn't start running bus services until September 1998, when it took over a franchise covering a large part of Hong Kong. Since 1998, its white, orange and green buses have become a very familiar sight all over Hong Kong Island and also in many parts of Kowloon and the New Territories. To start off with, New World First Bus was a joint venture between the British bus and train operator First Group and the Hong Kong-based New World Development Company, which is a company dealing in property, infrastructure and services, department stores and hotels. Now, the major shareholder of New World Development was a company called Chow Tai Fook Enterprises, and Chow Tai Fook is best known as the owner of a massive chain of jewellery stores. People may remember there was a time when virtually every bus in Hong Kong seemed to have a Chow Tai Fook advert pasted all over its back. So, this unlikely partnership was brought about by a desire to bid for a franchise to operate buses in Hong Kong. The franchise in question belonged to a company called China Motor Bus. China Motor Bus was a family-owned company specialising in bus operation and property development, which could trace its origins all the way back to 1924 and the dawn of bus operation in Hong Kong. When, in 1933, the Hong Kong government sought to regulate bus services by awarding exclusive franchises, China Motor Bus was awarded the exclusive franchise to operate on Hong Kong Island. The company survived the war years when it lost nearly all of its vehicles to enemy action, and for a long time its trading position was absolutely secure, but that wasn't going to last. From quite early on, the company was resistant to change. It was slow to adopt the double-decker, despite a dreadful shortage of capacity in the 60s and 70s, and slower still to convert to one-person operation. The company was reluctant to buy new vehicles, preferring instead to rebody existing chassis or to buy batches of mid-life second-hand buses from sources like London Transport. But what really annoyed the authorities was China Motor Bus's resistance to adopting air conditioning, when this was fitted as standard to any new vehicles bought by the fledgling City Bus, a company that would go on to take a lot of work away from China Motor Bus. In 1993, City Bus acquired a quarter of all China Motor Bus routes in a tendering exercise. China Motor Bus finally got the message and bought some air-conditioned vehicles, but it was too little too late. Post-1997, the new Hong Kong government decided that it had had enough of the unreliability and the overcrowding, and tenders were invited for the lion's share of the China Motor Bus franchise. There were a number of interested bidders, including all of the existing Hong Kong bus operators, plus Stagecoach from the UK, but New World First Bus came out of nowhere and won the tender. They would take over 88 bus routes with effect from the 1st of September 1998. And they had to promise to introduce 500 new buses, all air-conditioned, by the end of 1999, and to improve the standard of service to the level that passengers and politicians had been demanding for years. Given that the new franchise holder couldn't possibly magic up sufficient new vehicles to run all the services from day one, New World First Bus had to negotiate with China Motor Bus to buy 710 of their existing vehicles, and to rent garage space to park them in. China Motor Bus played hard to get, and the deal wasn't signed until a mere 2 weeks before the start of the franchise. Under the watchful eye of the local media, and in an incredible logistical exercise that must have caused many a grey hair among the management, New World First Bus took to the road and overnight became a major player in the Hong Kong franchised bus sector. Such new buses as had been delivered by then were pressed into service, and the second-hand buses went out with stickers over their China Motor Bus fleet names and with banners promoting the new operator. First off, we're going to have a look at some of the ex-China Motor Bus vehicles that took to the road on the 1st of September 1998. This is LF187, an Alexander-bodied Leyland fleet line, which I'm showing you because it's typical of a fleet of 10.1 metre long wheel-based fleet lines built for China Motor Bus between 1974 and 1979. As was customary at the time, they were built with narrow front entrances to help drivers cope with large crowds of boarding passengers. New World First Bus acquired 84 of these Alexander-bodied long fleet lines from China Motor Bus, but not this one. LF187 retired in August 95 and was already scrapped before the takeover. These were the oldest buses acquired and inevitably the first to be disposed of. All of the long wheelbase fleet lines were delicensed within the first year. The MB class was originally 40 vehicles strong and dated from 1979. They were the longest two-axle vehicles in the territory and with the highest axle weight, for which special dispensation was received from the Hong Kong government. They featured 3+2 seating and the normal, for that time, single-width entrance. New World First Bus inherited all but one of them and gave a high priority to disposing of them, a process which was virtually completed within 12 months. This particular one was delicensed in February 1999, by which time it was very nearly 20 years old. That's 2 years over the statutory maximum of 18 years on franchise services. Although this model has red number plates, they belong to an earlier period in time and it wouldn't have had them in 1998. This is LV1, the first of a fleet of Leyland Victory 2 double-deckers. The Victory 2 has an unusual history. At a time when British Leyland were trying to flog rear-engined Atlanteans and fleet lines to reluctant customers in the Far East, an enterprising South African manufacturer put a double-deck bus body on a Guy Victory J front-engine lorry chassis and got a warm reception for it in Hong Kong. Not to be outdone, Leyland, which owned Guy Motors, put a modified version of the Victory chassis into production and Hong Kong operators bought it in large numbers, with both Alexander and Duple Metsec bodywork. This one was new in October 79 and was withdrawn in April 2000. As well as the long 10.1 metre fleet lines, CMB also had 39.5 metre short wheelbase fleet lines dating from 1979 which, being low height, were essential for Route 15 to Victoria Peak because the route passes under a low bridge shortly before the summit. Also, there is a turning movement in Mansfield Road where buses are not really supposed to reverse but are instead supposed to turn fully about in one swept movement, for which of course a shorter wheelbase is very helpful. So the short fleet lines had to be retained until air-conditioned replacements started arriving. SF8 was one of two decorated in all-over adverts for Service 15 and which survived until August 2000. The other, SF31, is now preserved at the Scottish Vintage Bus Museum. Dennis, Leyland's main competitor in the Far East, also developed a front-engine bus chassis at about the same time as Leyland was coming up with the Victory 2. This was the Dennis Jubilant, which was available with bodywork by Duple Metsec and by Alexander. And the Alexander body ones, apart from some very minor details, were virtually indistinguishable from the Leyland Victories and had the same engines and gearboxes. Unlike KMB, which bought 360 production models, China Motor Bus bought only 30, with Alexander bodies, and all but one of them passed to New World First Bus. Unlike the Victories, none of them were repainted into New World First Bus colours, and all were disposed of by the end of August 1999. China Motor Bus bought 167 Alexander-bodied Leyland Victory 2 double-deckers between 1979 and 1983, and New World First Bus acquired all but 4 of them. This bus type sold in large numbers in Hong Kong because the engine, being at the front, was cooled by the wind and less likely to boil up on steep hill climbs. It was, however, extremely noisy and prone to toppling over if cornered too fast due to the high centre of gravity and spongy suspension. A few Leyland Victories received New World First Bus livery, and this one, LV30, was given this special commemorative livery, which it wore on a farewell tour of Route 9 in the summer of 2000. These 12-metre metro buses, when they were first unveiled in 1981, were the highest capacity buses in the world, and both CMB and KMB took a quantity. While KMB opted for the more versatile 11-metre version, CMB took 84 12-metre examples. This is one of the second batch, delivered between 87 and 88, and featuring louvres along the sides to be better ventilated than the first batch. These buses had the Mark II Metro bus bodywork with larger front windows upstairs and without MCW's trademark asymmetrical windscreen. In 2000, most of the second batch of 40 vehicles were shipped to Ensign Bus for sale in the UK, where they were snapped up as school buses or for sightseeing work after conversion to open top. This one was used on the original London sightseeing tour. China Motorbus had 28 Dennis Condors with Duple Metsec bodywork delivered between October 1990 and January 1991. All of these passed to New World First Bus, who initially said that only air-conditioned buses would receive their new livery, and then changed their minds by applying the new colours to a number of non-air-conditioned buses from January 1999 onwards. So that you could tell them apart from air-conditioned buses, a sign was placed just under the front window pointing out that this was a non-air-conditioned bus. All the older types that received the new livery were given these notices. The last non-air-conditioned buses left the fleet in August 2002, but DM18 was converted to open top and hung on for another 3 years. LM10 was the last of a batch of 10 11-metre Leyland Olympians delivered to China Motorbus in December 1993. These were the last Leylands and the last non-air-conditioned double-deckers delivered to CMB. As these buses were still relatively new, and because of the cost of equipping them with air conditioning, our first group decided instead to export them to the UK in early 2000. On arrival they were refurbished, reseated, converted to single doorway and repainted. This particular one initially received first PMT's attractive red and yellow livery before succumbing to the so-called Barbie colour scheme. It stayed with a number of first group subsidiaries before ending up with First Eastern Counties. After experimenting with several different colour schemes for air-conditioned vehicles, China Motorbus opted for this white and blue colour scheme, which they applied to a batch of 30 Alexander-bodied Volvo Olympians delivered between September 94 and January 95. All of them transferred to New World First Bus on the 1st of September 98. Since China Motorbus was initially mistrustful of air-conditioned buses, early vehicles of this type were specified with a small number of opening windows, which could be unlocked if the air conditioning ever failed in service. These particular buses had gasket glazing, which you can tell from the rounded window corners. Later deliveries had square-cornered bonded glazing. This one was retired in July 2011. This is another air-conditioned Volvo Olympian originally delivered to China Motorbus, this one being from the second batch delivered between June and August 96. It is seen here after repainting to New World First Bus colours, which was something which happened very quickly to the air-conditioned vehicles acquired. They were also subject to major refurbishments in 1999 and 2000, and this helped many of them, including this one, to achieve 17 or more years of service. As well as the Volvo Olympians, China Motorbus also owned 92 air-conditioned Dennis Condors with Duple Metsec bodywork. These all passed to New World First Bus and, like the Volvo Olympians, were quickly repainted into New World First Bus white, orange and green. One modification which New World First Bus made to all of these buses was to replace the 3+2 seating on the upper deck with conventional 2+2 seating, in recognition of the fact that people weren't as skinny as they used to be and could do with a bit more personal space and comfort. These buses almost achieved their statutory maximum service life. This one was retired in April 2015, just 4 months short of 18 years in service. The model shown here carries branding from an early New World First Bus website. VA60 was one of the last batch of new double-deckers delivered to China Motorbus. They had tinted bonded glazing and larger destination displays at the front than their predecessors. This one was registered in February 1998, just 6 months before the company lost its franchise, and was one of 6 delivered in a new silver and blue livery. Like the other Volvo Olympians, VA60 was quickly repainted into white, orange and green, and it survived in frontline service until June 2015, when it was relegated to the training school. New World First Bus had promised a lot of new vehicles in a relatively short space of time, but not every bus manufacturer in the UK was in a position to respond that quickly. Of the 500 new buses ordered in the first 2 years, all but 40 were supplied by Dennis Specialist Vehicles, and the bodies were by Walter Alexander of Falkirk, Plaxtons of Scarborough and Duple Metsec. The new company ordered a lot of Dennis Darts, although it really needed double-deckers more. The Volvo Super Olympian was still under development, But fortunately the 12-metre Dennis Trident was in full production, and New World First Bus ordered nearly 200 of them. For a while they were the flagship of the new company, and with the stylised New World logo on the sides of many of them, they were a very imposing sight. The bus interiors were standardised as well, with cyan handrails and purple upholstery. Gone was the 3+2 seating that the old company was so wedded to, so as to squeeze as many people as possible onto every bus. Buses were now more spacious and more comfortable to travel in. The bus stop flags and timetable cases were all changed, and a new style of bus shelter was also introduced. Now we're going to look more at the buses ordered new by New World First Bus in its first 2 years of operation. The first wave of new vehicles to arrive in Hong Kong, if you'll forgive the pun, were 12-metre Dennis Tridents with Alexander ALX 500 bodywork. New World First Bus managed to register 19 of them in August in time for the start of the franchise, and the rest of the order for 190 were put into service over the following 11 months. This one was used extensively in promotional photo shoots and publicity before the franchise was taken over, and, like a number of its batch, carried this interesting wave branding, which actually spells out the letters NW, standing for New World. New World First Bus, anxious to get its hands on whatever new vehicles it could, also acquired a number of Dennis darts. There were 42 10.7 metre darts like this one, and there were also 34 10.1 metre darts, all of them with Plaxton Pointer 2 bodywork. But as soon as adequate stocks of double-deckers had been received, the company started to think about moving on some of these single-deckers. Many of them, like this one, were sent back to the UK for further service with First Group companies in 2001, and in 2003 10 of the longer darts were sold to K&B. Only a dozen of the longer darts managed to stay in service with their original owner until 2015, but the shorter darts lasted for another year. Here's another Dennis Trident, this one dating from October 1998, and instead of the wave branding, this one is wearing what became the standard fleet livery, as already seen on some of the former China Motorbus vehicles. The branding seen either side of the destination display is promotion for the company's website. Route 798 was not part of the original franchise, but rather one of 7 new routes for Chuen Newtown, routes which the company acquired through the tendering process in 2000. Since the bodies of the new fleet were taking longer to build than the chassis, New World First Bus asked Duple Metsec to body 100 of their new Dennis Tridents, using the new style of bodywork that had already been supplied to Citybus, and their arrival coincided with the first deliveries of similar buses to K&B. Not to miss a promotional opportunity, the first Duple Metsec body Trident delivered to New World First Bus was branded as the 100th new bus for the company, to proclaim the message that new buses were arriving in abundance and the age profile of the fleet was improving dramatically. From the outset, chassis manufacturer Dennis did very well out of First Group's venture in the Far East, but their main competitor Volvo was in the process of developing its low-floor replacement for the Olympian, which was named the Super Olympian, bearing the model number B10TL. Of the first 500 new vehicles delivered to the company, only 40 were Volvos, and this is one of them, dating from July 1999. The two most noticeable differences between the Super Olympian and the Dennis Trident are the engine cover, which resembles the back of the old Olympian, and the radiator behind the front wheel on the offside. This bus lasted almost 18 years and retired in June 2017. That last model of a Super Olympian was a fairly recent issue, but here's an older one by Creative Master Northcord, which is carrying branding from the new Chuen franchise, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. The publicity for these new routes centred on a Shogun theme, and the person who modelled for the picture of Napoleon on the back of the bus is actually the company's managing director. Although Volvo were late to the party, they did eventually manage to sell over 100 Super Olympians to New World First Bus, as well as a substantial quantity to K&B. This one was in service from July 1999 to July 2017. Always happy to get their hands on more air-conditioned double-deckers, New World First Bus bought a number of such buses in September 1999 from Hong Kong Airport Cargo Terminal Limited, who no longer needed them as staff buses once the old airport at Kai Tak was closed. 2 of them for 12-metre Volvo Olympians, and this one was one of a quartet of 4-year-old 12-metre Dennis Dragons. The Dragon, of course, was the same as the Dennis Condor, which was itself a 3-axle version of the Dennis Dominator. Dennis badge-engineered the Condor to please the directors of China Motorbus, for reasons I won't bore you with. This one remained in service until June 2013. New World First Bus received 62 Alexander-bodied 10.6 metre short wheelbase Dennis Tridents between June and October 1999. 1657 was one of only 16 that actually served a full 18 years with its original owner. The rest of the batch was sold on to Kowloon Canton Railway Company between 2004 and 2005 for service in the massive new towns being built in the Western New Territories. At the same time as it had these, New World First Bus also received 30 11.3 metre Tridents with similar bodywork, and 6 of these were also sold to KCRC. I'd like to show you one, but nobody's ever made a model of the 11.3 metre version. In December 1999, the low-floor replacements for the short wheelbase Leyland fleet line started to arrive. These were Dennis Tridents, which were specially shortened for the job. The bodywork by Duple Metsec was to a specially reduced height of 4.17 metres, and the front overhang was also shortened to give the smallest possible swept path for a 3-axle vehicle. 3301, shown here, carried special branding which highlighted how low the buses were. This bus was the first of an initial order for 40 vehicles, delivered between the end of 1999 and March 2000. With the arrival of this batch of vehicles, New World First Bus met its promise to introduce 500 new vehicles in the first 2 years of its franchise. Not much is known about 3601, except that it was either a demonstrator or a cancelled order from somebody. It could have been mistaken for one of the Duple Metsec bodied low-height Dennis Tridents we've just seen, but this one was full height. It had round headlights when all the other Duple Metsec bodies had square ones, and on board everything was different. The handrails and armrests were green, and the seat covering was totally different to the rest of the fleet, which all featured a standard colour scheme specified by First Group. 3601 remained unique in the New World First Bus fleet, but nevertheless served a full 18 years, lasting out until September 2018. The Dennis Trident was not the only type of vehicle to carry the attractive wave livery. It was also worn by a number of these Neoplan Centro liners from Germany. These were expensive, high-specification, integrally constructed buses from a company better known for supplying luxury single and double-deck touring coaches. When the first one was delivered in May 2000, the local dealer made a big thing about how technically advanced they were, with features such as electronically controlled air suspension and computerised fault logging, but in-service experience was not quite so impressive, with fuel consumption high and problems with corrosion. No more than the original 30 were bought, but most of them lasted a full 18 years in service. Having purchased 40 low-height Dennis Tridents in 1999, New World First Bus later went back for an additional 20 vehicles to the same specification, but by this time Duple Metsec had become part of Transbus, and production of the DM5000 body type had been scaled down to left-hand drive vehicles only and moved to Alexander's factory at Falkirk. Transbus were persuaded to produce these last 20 right-hand drive vehicles, which arrived between July and September 2002. These were outwardly similar to the first 40, except that they featured different rear light clusters. All 60 low-height Dennis Tridents became a common sight on a number of Hong Kong Island routes, and they were the mainstay of services 9, 14 and 15 until 2017. This is numerically the last of the Super Olympians, seen here on Route 682. The 600 series of bus routes indicate that they use the Eastern Harbour Tunnel, which was opened in 1989 and which runs between Quarry Bay and Lam Tin. This particular bus stayed in service until September 2018, when it was repainted and transferred to the Citybus non-franchise fleet for use on residential services. A number of Volvo Olympians were so treated, and they replaced the last high-floor Volvo Olympians in the territory. 5103 is now number 269 in the Citybus fleet. In a move that must have surprised everybody, given the amount of resources and expertise given to the project, First Group announced in April 2000 that it had sold its 26% stake in New World First Bus to its partner, giving New World Development complete control of the bus company. Its major competitor, Citybus, had recently been bought by Stagecoach, and there may have been premonitions of competition ahead. Whether that was the reason, or whether it was just that the directors of First Bus despaired of the venture ever making money, we shall never know. The company timeline on the First Group website makes absolutely no reference to its 2-year venture into Hong Kong, so one can infer that it was something they'd rather forget. In 2002, New World Development created New World Service Holdings, or NWS, to manage all its infrastructure and transport interests, and ownership of New World First Bus was vested in a subsidiary called NWS Transport Services, which was jointly owned by NWS Holdings and Chow Tai Fook, the jewellers. What happened next was interesting. In 2003, when Brian Suter sold his stake in Citybus, he sold it to another subsidiary of Chow Tai Fook Enterprises. What this meant was that the two main Hong Kong Island bus operators were now parts of the Chow Tai Fook organisation. The following year, in 2004, through a complex series of share transfers, the ownership of Citybus also passed to NWS Transport Services, and the new organisation that we recognise today was formed. The Citybus management team, headed by Lyndon Rees, took over the running of New World First Bus, and their first task was to make it profitable. Differences in pay and conditions between New World First Bus and Citybus meant that it would be difficult to merge the two companies, but there were opportunities to streamline management, administration and accounting, publicity, and to bring the two driver training schools into one unit. Services were reviewed to make sure they weren't competing unnecessarily with each other, and most noticeably there was a central vehicle buying policy, meaning that from now on the two operators would tend to buy the same types of vehicle. By the time Lyndon Rees retired in 2006, New World First Bus was inching towards profitability. So here are some of the vehicles that were bought or which moved into the fleet during the NWS period, which will take us more or less up to the present day. Having restocked the fleet with modern air-conditioned vehicles, it was several years before NWS needed to buy any new vehicles for the New World First Bus fleet. In 2008 there was a batch of 18 12-metre Alexander Dennis Enviro 500s with Euro 4 engines like the one seen here. These were followed in 2009 and 2010 by 40 11.3 metre examples, of which there's unfortunately no model to show you. A further 65 12-metre Enviros with this style of bodywork were delivered over a long period between 2011 and 2013, all of them with Euro 5 engines, and this is one of that batch, being new in April 2011. A second generation of Enviro 500 was unveiled by Alexander Dennis in 2012, and the first examples of this model for New World First Bus were a dozen 11.3 metre vehicles which entered service between 2013 and 2014. These had a new chassis design with engine and gearbox slightly repositioned and a new style of bodywork with redesigned staircase. This is 4051, which was delivered at the end of January 2014 and was the last of the batch of 12. In 2014, 10 12-metre Volvo Olympians with Alexander bodywork were transferred from the Citybus fleet to the New World First Bus fleet. None of them received fleet livery, and each one was given an all-over advertisement of some kind. This was Citybus 621, dating from July 97, which became VA 67 in the New World fleet, and which carried this advertising scheme for driver recruitment, which is very well reproduced here by Model 1. VA 67 ran in this condition for some 16 months before being retired in July 2015. Another 12-metre Olympian was Citybus 625, which was transferred to New World First Bus in April 2014 and became VA 75 in their fleet. it carried this advert for Service 18X, offering faster through journeys between Kennedy Town and Shaoqiwan. This vehicle was retired in April 2015. The last of the 10 transferred Olympians was VA76, which started life in 1997 as Citybus 622. This all-over advertisement for Route 798 harks back to the Shogun theme that was used to launch the route back in 2000 when the Chuen franchise was awarded to New World First Bus. Like the bus before, this bus was withdrawn in April 2015. In 2011, the 3 biggest bus operators in Hong Kong were given government subsidies to buy prototype hybrid drive vehicles with a view to tackling air pollution, and all 3 turned to Alexander Dennis. New World First Bus has 2 E50H Enviros with British Aerospace system of hybrid drivetrain, 6.7 litre diesel engines and 600 volt electric motors. They have regenerative braking and 16 sets of 640 volt batteries, which are needed not only for traction but also to power the air conditioning system. This all takes up a lot of space, so the vehicles have lost 2 rows of seating on the lower deck. The prototypes arrived in 2014, and you might have expected that orders would have been placed for production vehicles by now, but so far no orders from Hong Kong for hybrid buses have been forthcoming. This was one of a large order for 250 12-metre Enviro 500s placed with Alexander Dennis by NWS in 2014, of which about a third were allocated to New World First Bus for the replacement of the earliest Dennis Tridents. This one was registered in August 2015 and is seen here on a cross-harbour tunnel route. Later in 2015, NWS started to take delivery of 11.3 metre Volvo B9TLs, bodied by Wrightbus. 30 of them went to New World First Bus and 60 to Citybus. These buses were replacements for the company's last 11 metre Dennis Condors and Volvo Olympians, which were inherited from China Motor Bus and which had come to the end of their service lives. In 2016, New World First Bus also took delivery of 25 12-metre B9TLs, also with Wright Gemini 2 bodywork. At present time there's no model of these, but there is one somewhere in the pipeline. In 2016, Alexander Dennis started to roll out its MMC version of the Enviro 500, MMC standing for Major Model Change, and the changes were more than just cosmetic, with improvements made to both the chassis and the bodywork. This batch started to arrive in January 2016, and this particular vehicle was registered in June of that year. The engine of this bus is Euro 5 compliant. When NWS was shopping for a replacement for the 60 low-height Dennis Tridents, which were coming to the end of their lives, it looked at the 2-axle Volvo B9TL before eventually deciding on Alexander Dennis's E400, of which it already had some experience in the Citybus fleet. The 60 new 2-axle vehicles which started arriving at the end of 2016 were unlike the Citybus examples in that they were built to the new MMC specification, and the interior layout of the bodywork is different in a number of ways. These buses spent several months on general Hong Kong services while drivers were being trained before taking up duties on the 9 to Shek O, the 14 over the Tai Tam Dam and the 15 to Victoria Peak, for which low bridge vehicles are still a requirement. NWS decided that half of the Citybus order placed in 2016 for 60 12.8 metre Enviro 500s would be allocated to New World First Bus to increase capacity on the North Island routes. In turn, a similar number of identical vehicles ordered by New World were transferred to Citybus when they were delivered later in 2017, and Citybus, in order to make room for them, sent 30 12 metre Enviros dating from 2014 to New World. Both fleets now have a substantial quantity of 12.8 metre vehicles, which are becoming the de facto standard for use on high demand services, and the most recent examples are compliant with the Euro 6 emissions standard. Well, that brings us more or less up to the present day. In 2016, NWS Holdings bought back the 50% of shares in NWS Transport Services that had been retained by Chow Tai Fook Enterprises, and the bus businesses were indirectly floated on the Hong Kong stock market, achieving a healthy valuation of 1.38 billion Hong Kong dollars. That's about £135 million sterling. Latest arrivals in the NWS camp are Wright Gemini 3-bodied Volvo B8Ls for both New World and Citybus. There isn't a model of one yet, but there is a model of the KMB version, so it's only a matter of time. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, I would urge you to have a look at the companion video, which tells the story of Citybus. Bye bye.